The time is just gone 8:22 a.m. on this Friday morning. If you have just tuned in, we welcome you. We welcome all Salam Media listeners, our viewers to the show this morning on News and Views on this Friday morning. And we are now taking a look at electoral reform. Now, today, an event that is taking place is the electoral reform in Indaba, and it is taking place from 9 o'clock this morning right until 4 o'clock in Braamfontein. It will be streamed live. The key issue here is the need for an event like this and what are the issues with regard to electoral reform in South Africa. Now, discussing this in Indaba with me this morning is the executive director of My Vote Counts. We're talking with Minhaj Jeenah. Minhaj, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam, Minhaj. Thanks for having me.
Yes, wonderfully able to join us. Jumaa Mubarak to you. And let's just talk about electoral reform in South Africa. Now, since the democracy, since 1994, we've had a number of elections, both local and national elections. And why are we still talking about electoral reform?
Um, so, so since 1994, we've had two sets of elections. We have general elections, and we have local government elections, which took place last year. Our next general elections takes place in 2024, and the two sets of elections operate very differently. On a national and provincial level, we have a proportional representation system, which was necessary in 1994. It's a system that where only political parties can compete for power, and political parties then get seats in Parliament, in the National Assembly, based on the percentage of votes that they get. And what happened 2 years ago is the Constitutional Court ruled that process, that electoral process, is unconstitutional because it doesn't allow for ordinary people, independent candidates is what they called it, to stand for provincial and national elections.
Yes, I think one of the key issues here is, we've learned many lessons since the beginning and since we become a democracy. And the key issue here is a political party-based electoral system within which we operate. Is that a concern? And is this an issue that obviously is it in line with the Constitution, Minaj?
Well, what's not in line with the Constitution, according to the Constitutional Court, um, is, is the fact that independent candidates can't stand. So it's simply that. So what happened 2 years ago, after the Constitutional Court ruled that the Act is unconstitutional, it told Parliament that Parliament has 2 years to fix the Electoral Act, which is a piece of legislation that governs the electoral process. That was 2 years and 3 months ago. And Parliament went through this process to reform something like fundamental to our democracy. And Parliament's deadline was in June this year. And in June this year, Parliament didn't meet its deadline, and it asked the Constitutional Court for an extension of that deadline. And the Constitutional Court granted Parliament a 6-month extension. So now Parliament has until December to make a decision on how to reform the electoral system. However,
Yes.
in the 2 years that Parliament had, they had to go through a public participation process because that's generally how laws are made, and because this is such an important process for our democracy. But the process that Parliament went through was flawed. Parliament didn't consider all the requirements for public participation process. The public didn't meaningfully contribute. All of us didn't meaningfully contribute to how this legislation should be. The other problem is that the Minister of Home Affairs, who was mandated basically to lead this process, appointed a ministerial advisory committee to advise him on on an electoral amendment bill. So the bill that will direct the changes in the electoral system. And the Ministerial Advisory Committee went through this process and developed two views. A majority view, so a view that most of members of the advisory committee agreed on, and a minority view. And the Minister of Home Affairs, an ANC member, obviously, completely rejected the majority view, and that wasn't even presented to the public during the public participation process. So the reason why we're sitting here where we have to bring different members of society together to speak about electoral reform is because Parliament failed on its duty to do that. And now Parliament is in all probability going to adopt a flawed bill, a bill that's possibly unconstitutional, and a bill that was developed through a flawed public participation process.
Yes, and also Minaj, talking about this bill and talking about the flawed bill, which has had consequences as well, because I think the key issue here is the question of accountability, because under the present electoral system, we find that with the dominance of the likes of the ANC, obviously, is making people who are voted in, members of parliament, for instance, not making them accountable to voters, but rather to party bosses and loyalty to the parties that they represent.
Yeah, that's fundamentally the problem. I mean, going back to how the electoral system works, um, political parties submit lists to the IEC, and closed lists that we can't really see, of individuals who they would put in parliament, if they are to get enough votes. Um, these individuals don't necessarily represent the views of the people who vote for them, whether it be ANC members or non-ANC members who vote for the ANC. And it's a closed list. So there's no real accountability there. I think you're right, tonight. There is accountability to party bosses, not to the public, and people, the public representatives sitting in the National Assembly make decisions um, uh, based on the whims of party bosses, and that is fundamentally the problem.
Yes, and just looking at what can we expect from this Indaba that is taking place, because we know there have been calls for a national referendum on the electoral system to actually define a way forward, Minaj.
So the National Indaba, sorry, the Joburg Indaba is part of a series of convenings that we host. The purpose of the convenings are to build consensus around how we imagine an ideal electoral system to look, an electoral system that's accountable, and an electoral system that ensures representation. Um, and the other purpose of the Indaba and the following convenings is for civil society, for ordinary South Africans, for activists, for social movements to collectively develop a program of action, in order for us to achieve this ideal electoral system. Um, so as I mentioned, Parliament has until the end of December to finalize the electoral reform process, which by the way they're unlikely to do. Um, and if Parliament is to adopt the current electoral amendment bill, which is likely, um, then we need to think about what to do beyond that, towards 2024 and beyond 2024. So the purpose of the Indaba, the most important purpose of the Indaba is really is to develop that program of action and to agree collectively in a program of action.
Yes, and I see you've got quite a few experts actually at this Indaba, Minaj.
Yeah. So at the Indaba, we have participants will be people representing NGOs, people representing social movements, ordinary activists as well. The speakers at this Indaba will be people like Dr. Sitembile Mbete and Bali Musa, both of whom were on the Ministerial Advisory Committee that I spoke about that advised the minister on how to reform the electoral system. We also have Lawson Naidu, who who's the director at CASAC, who has made several submissions to the Minister of Home Affairs and to Parliament on the on electoral reform. We have people from My Vote Counts as well, similarly, who have made submissions. All the speakers have been involved in some way or the other in this process.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to this, and I see it is going to be streamed live as well. But for now, Minhaj, Jazakallah for your time, for coming on, for talking to us this morning. All the best to you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.
Executive Director of My Vote Counts, Jeenah, was us this morning, and this is ahead of the electoral reform Indaba that is taking place in Bloemfontein today, starting off at 9 and finishing off at 4 o'clock. And this is going to be an event that is going to be streamed live. The time is just gone, 8:33 a.m. We come back. We'll be joined by President of the South African Hajj and Umrah Council, Shaheen Essop.